I knew it was wrong, but when my friend's mom whispered, "If anyone finds out, you'll be in big trouble," my heart skipped a beat. The day began like any other, warm sunlight spilling lazily through the windows of my friend's house. I had come over to hang out, nothing more than a casual visit after school, but the moment I stepped inside, something about the air felt different. Maybe it was the way the light caught on the polished kitchen counters, or perhaps it was the faint, comforting scent of coffee mixed with vanilla that seemed to linger in every corner. She was there before I could even process the scene, my friend's mom, moving through the kitchen with a quiet elegance that immediately drew my attention. She was in her early 40s, graceful, confident, yet there was a softness to her movements, a subtle vulnerability hidden behind her poised exterior. Her hair caught the light as she reached for a mug, and her smile, warm but slightly teasing, made me feel simultaneously at ease and oddly nervous. I tried to focus on my friend, but I couldn't help noticing her small gestures, the way her fingers lightly brushed the rim of the coffee cup, or how her eyes crinkled slightly when she laughed at something he said. There was an understated charm in her presence that seemed to slow the room down, and I found myself watching quietly, absorbing every detail, the faint shimmer of her earrings, the soft rustle of her blouse as she moved, the easy confidence in the way she carried herself. Our first interaction was innocent, almost accidental. I handed her a dish she had dropped while reaching for something on the counter. Our hands brushed briefly, a spark of warmth traveling through me. She looked up, her gaze meeting mine, and there was a flicker of recognition in her eyes, like she knew exactly how much I had noticed her. A small, knowing smile curved her lips, and I quickly looked away, my heart racing more than I expected. There was something unspoken in that moment, a subtle acknowledgement of curiosity and interest without any words. It wasn't overt, and it wasn't supposed to be, it was the kind of moment that lingered in your chest, leaving you both uneasy and intrigued. The rest of the afternoon passed in a haze of casual conversation and small, fleeting glances. I found myself laughing a little louder, listening a little closer, drawn in by her presence in a way that I couldn't quite explain. It was the beginning of something delicate and unspoken, a quiet fascination that neither of us fully acknowledged yet, but which would slowly grow into something far more profound. By the time I left that day, the memory of her smile, the warmth of her touch, and the curious glint in her eyes had settled deep in my mind, a subtle promise that our story was only just beginning. It wasn't planned, really. One moment I was carrying a basket of groceries into the kitchen, juggling cans and bags, and the next, she was right there beside me, her presence filling the small space like a quiet warmth I hadn't expected. My friend had stepped outside for a quick errand, leaving us alone, and suddenly the house felt smaller, more intimate, charged with a subtle tension I couldn't quite name. She laughed softly when I struggled with a particularly stubborn bag, the sound light and melodic, and something in me relaxed while simultaneously tightening my chest. I handed her a can, our fingers brushing again, and this time the touch lingered slightly longer, as if neither of us were in a rush to pull away. Her hand was warm, firm, yet gentle, and I felt a curious mix of comfort and excitement ripple through me. We moved together naturally, stacking groceries on the counter, sharing small spaces as we passed each other. I noticed how her perfume mixed with the faint smell of fresh vegetables and sunlight filtering through the kitchen window, creating a sensory impression I couldn't shake. There was a rhythm to her movements, a quiet grace in the way she turned, tilted her head, or reached for something on a high shelf. I caught myself stealing glances, feeling my chest tighten when our eyes met, only to quickly look away, embarrassed at the intensity of my own attention. At one point, she leaned slightly to steady herself while reaching for a jar, and I instinctively reached out, our hands meeting in a moment that felt both accidental and deliberate. Her eyes softened, and she smiled, a tiny, knowing smile that made my heart skip. It wasn't romantic in the traditional sense yet, but it carried a warmth and intimacy I had never expected to feel with my friend's mom. The conversation flowed easily, light and casual, yet beneath it was a subtle layer of something more, curiosity, attraction, unspoken understanding. She shared a small story about her day, her voice gentle, with an almost imperceptible vulnerability in the way she phrased certain words. I listened, captivated, and when she laughed, I felt a quiet thrill at being the one who heard it, who shared this moment with her in private. By the time my friend returned, I felt a strange mixture of exhilaration and apprehension. Those few moments alone had left an impression I couldn't ignore, a flutter of something forbidden, something tender, a connection that neither of us could yet name but that hung between us, delicate and electrifying. Even now, thinking back on it, I can still feel the warmth of her hand, the subtle scent in the air, and the quiet awareness that something had shifted. That day, in the simplest of tasks, we had crossed an invisible line, a slow and subtle beginning that promised more tension, more closeness, and more quiet longing. It was quiet in the house, the kind of stillness that made every sound feel sharper. I was helping her clear the counter after lunch, stacking plates and wiping up crumbs, when suddenly we found ourselves in closer proximity than usual. The air between us seemed to hum, a subtle, almost tangible tension that made my chest tighten. She leaned slightly to reach for a glass on the top shelf, and instinctively I stepped closer, my hand brushing against hers. Our eyes met, and for a moment, the room felt impossibly small. I could see the light catching the edges of her hair, the soft curve of her cheek illuminated by the afternoon sun, and the quiet steadiness of her gaze held me in place. Then, in the gentlest of movements, she leaned toward me. Her voice was low, intimate, barely above a whisper, yet it carried a weight that made my stomach knot. "If anyone finds out, you'll be in big trouble." The words landed softly, but the effect was immediate and electric. My heart thudded in my chest, my hands gripping the counter a little tighter than necessary. Her warm breath brushed against my ear as she spoke, scented lightly with the faint aroma of her perfume, a mix of vanilla and something soft, comforting yet intoxicating. I could feel the faint pulse of her heartbeat in the space between us, a rhythm that seemed to echo my own. I wanted to respond, to say something witty or calm, but my throat felt tight. The sound of her voice, so close and deliberate, made it impossible to think clearly. Instead, I nodded slightly, words failing me, and felt her hand brush against my arm as she adjusted her stance. The touch was fleeting, casual on the surface, but underneath, it carried a promise, a delicate, teasing tension that neither of us could ignore. I could see a glimmer of amusement in her eyes, mingled with a hint of warning, as if she understood the effect her words had on me. My mind raced with questions. Did she mean it seriously? Was this a playful test? Or something more? The uncertainty only made the moment more intense, charged with emotions I wasn't supposed to feel, yet couldn't deny. As she straightened and moved back, the ordinary world returned, the clinking of dishes, the muted hum of the refrigerator, but the lingering warmth of that whisper stayed with me. I could still feel her breath, the soft pressure of her hand, and the weight of her gaze, all of it imprinting itself on my senses. That brief whisper had changed something. It wasn't just curiosity anymore, it was a quiet, unspoken bond, a forbidden connection that drew me in without words, without promise, yet impossible to ignore. I left the kitchen that day feeling both exhilarated and unsettled, aware that we had stepped into a delicate tension, the kind that could either blossom slowly into something meaningful, or become a secret too heavy to bear. The next few days passed in a haze of normal routines, but something had shifted. Every glance, every small gesture from her lingered in my mind longer than it should have. I kept replaying that whisper, the warmth of her hand brushing mine, the quiet weight of her gaze. It wasn't just curiosity anymore, it was something deeper, a pull I couldn't quite name but couldn't resist. It happened one afternoon when I was helping her organize the living room. Boxes of old photos and memorabilia were stacked haphazardly, and she paused beside me, letting out a soft sigh. Her shoulders tensed for a moment, and then she sank onto the couch, gesturing for me to join her. There was a rare weariness in her eyes that I hadn't noticed before, a subtle vulnerability that made my chest tighten. I sat down beside her, close enough to feel the warmth radiating from her, but careful to respect the invisible boundary between us. She began to talk, not about me, not about the whisper, but about herself. About the loneliness she sometimes felt, the challenges of balancing work and life, and the quiet moments when she wished someone could understand her without judgment. Her voice was gentle, tinged with something almost fragile, and I listened intently, feeling honored that she trusted me with this piece of herself. Occasionally, her hand would brush against mine as she gestured, or she would lean slightly closer to emphasize a point. Each time, a shiver of awareness ran through me, a quiet tension beneath the surface of the conversation. But it wasn't a tension of desire, it was of trust, of connection, of something profoundly human. I realized that the attraction I felt was entwined with admiration, respect, and genuine care. I offered small reassurances, careful words, letting her know I was listening, that I understood even in the simplest ways. At one point, she reached out, resting her hand lightly on my shoulder. The touch was brief, but the warmth lingered, like a silent acknowledgement that she felt it too. There was no rush, no expectation, just a shared moment of quiet intimacy that spoke louder than any words could. When the conversation ended, there was a gentle pause, a mutual understanding that something significant had shifted. We returned to organizing the room, our movements casual, but the air between us was subtly charged. I left that day with a sense of awe and a strange, fluttering hope. The whisper had sparked curiosity, but this moment of vulnerability, had sparked connection. It wasn't just fascination anymore. It was trust. It was warmth. And it was the kind of quiet, slow-building bond that could grow into something far more profound, if we allowed it to. The days that followed our quiet conversation felt different, though nothing overtly changed. We went about our routines as usual, helping with chores, laughing at casual jokes, sharing snacks in the kitchen, but beneath the surface, a subtle current ran between us. Every glance, every brush of skin, every moment of proximity carried weight now, and I felt it with a heightened awareness that made my heart both race and ache. I remember one afternoon vividly. She was reorganizing a shelf of books while I dusted the living room, and I found myself unconsciously inching closer when I passed behind her. Our arms brushed lightly, a contact so fleeting it could have been accidental, yet it left a warmth that lingered long after. She glanced back at me, her eyes soft and curious, and I caught the faintest hint of a smile playing at the corners of her lips. It was a smile that said she noticed the same tension I did, yet neither of us spoke it aloud. Later, we sat together on the couch, pretending to watch a movie. Our shoulders brushed occasionally, her elbow resting lightly against mine, her hand occasionally grazing my forearm. Each touch was small, almost imperceptible, but it carried a quiet electricity that made me acutely aware of the space between us. When our eyes met, even for a fleeting second, I felt a flicker of something unspoken, a recognition, a longing, a delicate dance we were both learning to navigate. The beauty of these moments lay in their subtlety. There were no grand gestures, no declarations, only a series of small, intimate exchanges that slowly built a bond neither of us could deny. A hand adjusting a strand of hair from her face, a shoulder brush as we passed each other in the hallway, the shared laughter over something trivial, all of it layered with quiet tension and a sense of closeness that grew stronger with every interaction. I also noticed how her presence lingered in my senses, the soft warmth of her perfume, the way sunlight highlighted her hair, the gentle rhythm of her breathing when we sat near each other. Every glance carried a message, every pause an opportunity to feel the unspoken connection. And while there was an undeniable attraction, there was also comfort, a sense of trust and safety that made these moments feel profoundly intimate without crossing boundaries. By the end of that day, I realized something important: our bond was growing in ways I hadn't anticipated. It wasn't just desire, it was a delicate mix of fascination, admiration, trust, and the thrill of something forbidden yet entirely heartfelt. Each lingering glance, each tiny gesture, was a brick in the foundation of a connection that promised something deeper, something worth waiting for, something real. The evening was quiet, the kind of soft, golden light that filtered through the curtains making everything feel slower, more intimate. We were sitting on the porch, the air carrying a faint scent of jasmine from the garden, each of us holding a cup of tea. There was no rush, no grand occasion, just the ordinary moment stretched by something extraordinary simmering beneath the surface. I could feel her presence beside me, a gentle warmth that made my chest tighten with both anticipation and caution. She spoke softly about her day, and I found myself hanging on every word, noticing the subtle inflections in her voice, the way her fingers curled around the cup, the slight pause when she looked at me and smiled. Each detail etched itself into my awareness, making it impossible to focus on anything else. For the first time, I let my feelings slip into words. My voice was quiet, hesitant, almost afraid of breaking the fragile bubble of our closeness. I think about you more than I probably should, I admitted, my gaze falling to my hands wrapped around the warm mug. The words felt heavy, vulnerable, yet impossibly honest. She didn't speak immediately. Instead, she looked at me, really looked, and I could see something in her eyes, a mixture of understanding, caution, and something deeper that mirrored my own uncertainty. The silence stretched, electric and charged, and for a moment I thought I might have overstepped, that I had revealed too much too soon. Then, slowly, she reached out, her hand brushing against mine. The touch was gentle, intentional, and sent a quiet shiver up my spine. "I've wondered the same," she whispered, her voice soft, carrying warmth and a hint of hesitation. "But we need to be careful, this isn't simple." Her words were a warning, yes, but they were also an acknowledgement of the connection that had been building between us. The tension was both thrilling and tender, a delicate balance between desire and restraint. I could feel the pulse of her heartbeat in the space between our hands, the subtle warmth of her body as she leaned slightly closer, the steady rhythm of her breathing. We sat like that for a long while, neither moving nor speaking, just allowing the quiet intimacy to settle over us. Every glance, every small touch, was amplified by the honesty of our emotions, the unspoken recognition that this bond was real and fragile, exciting and terrifying all at once. By the time the evening faded into night, the confession had not ended with a passionate embrace, but it didn't need to. The hesitation, the careful acknowledgement, the shared understanding, all of it created a moment far more powerful. It was a promise of what could come, a deepening of trust and desire, and a recognition that some connections were worth nurturing slowly, deliberately, and with respect. The following evening, the house felt different, lighter, yet charged with a quiet intimacy that neither of us tried to ignore. I found her in the living room, sitting near the window where the last rays of sunlight spilled across the floor, painting everything in soft gold. She smiled when she saw me, a warmth in her expression that seemed to reach directly into my chest, and I felt a flutter of anticipation I could no longer suppress. We settled into a comfortable routine, sitting close but without crossing any line, sharing a cup of tea and a plate of cookies. Our hands brushed occasionally, intentionally or not, sending sparks of awareness up my arm. She laughed softly at something trivial I said, and I realized I was memorizing every detail, the tilt of her head, the subtle crinkle around her eyes, the softness in her voice. The familiarity of these moments made my chest ache with a quiet longing, yet it was peaceful, safe, and entirely exhilarating. I reached for her hand, just enough to let our fingers touch. She didn't pull away, instead, she allowed it, a small, gentle acknowledgement of the closeness we had nurtured over days of shared glances, quiet touches, and whispered confessions. The warmth of her skin, the gentle curve of her fingers, the steady rhythm of her pulse, it all became a language we both understood without words. For a long while, we simply sat there, hands together, talking about nothing important at all. The conversation flowed easily, yet beneath it was the awareness of what had passed between us, the whispered warning, the moments of vulnerability, the subtle tension of lingering glances. It was as if time had slowed, allowing us to savor the connection that had been carefully built, moment by moment, gesture by gesture. Eventually, the room grew dim with the fading sunlight, but the warmth between us remained. She leaned slightly toward me, resting her head briefly on my shoulder in a gesture that was both comforting and intimate. My heart swelled with a mixture of awe and affection. There was no need for grand declarations or dramatic gestures, the subtlety of our connection, the depth of trust and understanding, was enough. As I left that evening, I glanced back at her. She waved softly, her eyes holding a quiet promise, a recognition that what we had begun was meaningful, tender, and worth protecting. The story of our bond wasn't over, it was merely entering a phase of steady growth, of shared moments that would continue to deepen our connection. The forbidden tension, the whispered confessions, the delicate touches, they had all led to this, a warm, human, and emotionally satisfying conclusion. I walked away with a light heart, carrying the knowledge that some connections are built slowly, carefully, and beautifully, ready to flourish in their own time, grounded in trust, affection, and genuine understanding. If you enjoyed this slow-burn story of forbidden attraction and heartfelt connection, don't forget to hit subscribe, and click the bell so you never miss a new romance. Share your thoughts in the comments. Would you keep a secret like this, too?